Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at 1994 Collector's Choice football cards. Collector's Choice was a base brand set that Upper Deck made quite a ways into its run. In 1989, when it had kicked itself off as a baseball brand, it wanted to be a high-end card brand, and that's really all it ever cared to be. In 1990, they did make some cards for kids, which were comic ball cards, but they weren't really baseball cards. So they were creating fun things for kids, but they just didn't bother to make an affordable card brand. They really didn't think that would ever be a part of their portfolio, even down the road. And by 1993, they increased to making a card set called SP, which is an even higher end card than their regular cards. But they also made a card set called Fun Packs, which was, again, addressed for kids, only in this case, it was actually for baseball cards. But still, making a base brand was not something that they had bothered to do. And it wasn't until you got to 1994, or 93, 94, in that range, when they finally said, you know what, let's start to make these more basic cards, which are, you can sell more of them. Yes, they're cheaper, but you can sell more, and it provides a whole nother avenue of revenue. It was a section of the market they just hadn't bothered to cater to, but the market itself for base brand cards had kind of evolved by this point. Because in 1991, a base brand, be it Topps, Score, Fleer, these base brands were their own entity. That you went and bought packs, you put together the set, and if you chased cards, it was you were trying to get some more subset cards, or maybe a rookie card or a veteran card. You might chase after those cards, but for the most part, it was a matter of ripping packs for sets. But 1992 marked an important year where Topps, as well as Don Russ with their Leaf set, they created parallels in their card sets that allowed collectors to now want to chase something else. Because in every single pack, you would have one card that had gold foil on it, and that meant that it was a whole nother set that was more challenging. And for a base brand like Topps, some collectors could afford to just rip through boxes like crazy trying to put together the more challenging set. And this is what Upper Deck looked at and went, you know, we should be a part of that. Because yes, in 1994, they started to make parallels for their Upper Deck level of cards. But the idea that you could just rip through the cheaper cards like candy, that was a section of the market that they really needed the opportunity to cater to. And so 1994, they made that set with a set called Collector's Choice. Now, just a little background on the name Collector's Choice. Upper Deck always liked to refer to itself as the Collector's Choice. They used that tagline on their branding. But Upper Deck was a baseball set. And over in football, Pro Set was doing the exact same thing. So Pro Set really heavily marketed itself as the Collector's Choice. So you had two companies in different sports who were using this tagline to be a brand identifier. And it's probably not a coincidence that it wasn't until Pro Set ceased to exist that Upper Deck actually used Collector's Choice for a card brand. But they wanted to really lean in and make sure that everybody understood that, look, at the end of the day, they are the Collector's Choice, which, whether that was true or not, it's branding. But that's where the name Collector's Choice came from. It came from a tagline for Upper Deck and also for Pro Set. So the cards themselves, the set that they created in 1994 to cater to this very base brand level, the Topps Fleer level, the cards were all built around the parallel. I mean, that was the only reason that Upper Deck was making it for the most part. And so the cards themselves are built to kind of stay out of the way and allow the parallel to carry the day. And these cards are about as stripped down as you could possibly imagine. Simple white border around the outside, a big image on the inside, which isn't necessarily a very good image, and then a little bit of text about the player name, etc., and a big banner for Collector's Choice. I mean, the thing that stands out the most on this card is the brand Collector's Choice. The card back actually is, for Upper Deck, it's actually pretty good. If it wasn't for the white band around the outside of that as well, this could potentially be one of the best card backs that Upper Deck had ever done. So, strangely, that to me is kind of the strength of this card. Regardless, the key to this set was the parallels. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. This card was a base for two different parallels, silver and gold. And the silver parallel is exactly the same card in every way, front, back, except they have the team name stamped in silver foil. That's it. That's all there is to it. But the more challenging version of it is the gold, where they did the exact same thing. So the team name is stamped in gold foil, and the outer band has a very gold foil-like effect, but the whole surface of the card has a gold hue to it. So it's basically like the whole card is chromed in gold. Again, on the back, there's nothing to it. There's nothing special, with the exception of one thing, which is that for both of the parallels, the hologram is actually a gold hologram instead of a silver hologram. That's it on the back. So on the front, it's very clear to tell. Well, the silver is kind of tricky to tell because you got to get the light right to see it, but the gold is about as obvious as it gets. And the way that these were inserted into packs was every single pack had one of these inserts. Everyone had a silver insert, except one out of every 36 packs had the gold. So that means that if you bought a box, it was almost a guarantee that you would have one gold card in it. And the reason I say almost a guarantee is, personally, I have a deep-seated problem with Collector's Choice because I collected a lot of these boxes back at the time. And at one point, I opened 4 of these boxes in a row and didn't get a single gold card. Now, I contacted Upper Deck about it, and they just gave me some stupid form letter. So as far as I'm concerned, here we are 28 years later, and they still owe me. But the thing that bothered me about their form letter was it said that, across the entire print run, it's an average of 1 out of every 36. Now, 4 boxes in a row, that's kind of suspicious. But in the years since, it appears to me that, at least with football, that the gold cards are harder to come by for 94 Collector's Choice than just about any of the other parallels that they did. So it is possible that in this first year they made these parallels more difficult to get. I don't know, but I kind of get that feeling. So just so that you're aware that that is a possibility. But the entire set was done with both parallels. That doesn't mean that the gold parallels look the same in every single card in the set. Now, the set itself starts off with a couple of subsets. It starts off with rookies, and the rookies are a full bleed card, and the images are in their college uniforms. One of the things Upper Deck wanted to use Collector's Choice for was to do an early release. So if you release cards really early, you miss the draft picks. Then there's a window of time when you know who the draft picks are, so you can use college uniforms, but you can't use them in their pro uniforms. And then late release cards actually have the ability to show the players in their uniforms either in practice or, if it's late enough, in games. So they allowed Upper Deck to be a later release so that the cards for the rookies all looked professional. So here is in Collector's Choice, this is when we see the rookies in their college uniforms, which is, some people like it. I'm not a fan of it, but it's what they did. But it does provide a weakness in terms of, here you are about to collect a bunch of NFL cards and you start off with uniforms that are not pro. So for what it's worth. But the parallels for these cards, they have the stamp on it, and it's even harder to read on here because you don't even have the white border. So it can kind of get lost in the card. And for the gold parallel, interestingly, for the subsets we're going to be looking at, as you will see, they didn't chrome the whole surface of the card. They just did the stamp. So the main cards in the set have a chromed surface. For these, they don't. But there were 2 other subsets. The first one is Images of 93. And these are images from important games. The logo for it can kind of get lost in the card. I think it reads a little bit better than what we're about to see. But this is almost a nod to something Pro Set used to do, where every year in their card set, they would do the results of, or the winners of, a photo contest. It was an interesting little thing they did, and it's almost like this is another kick in the posterior of Pro Set by adding this in, which is not the same, but Images of 93 is kind of a weird theme to go by. So at any rate, they have these, and then they have Tradition of Excellence, and these cards look almost identical. The difference is that for Tradition of Excellence, they have a kind of a banner-like design. And the cards, they're actually 3 groupings of cards. The first grouping is the banner is in blue. The second grouping, the banner is in red, and the third grouping, the banner is in green. So they do have an evolution through the course of these cards. They're not parallels, it's just the first group, second group, third group. That's the way that it works. And then you just get into the card set with all the players, and then right at the end, they have 2 expansion team cards. And these are wonderful, wonderful looking cards. They really are great presentations of the logos of these 2 brand new teams. Now, these are among the first of the cards for the Panthers and the Jaguars. There was a card in 1993, so this is not the very first, but a couple of card brands like to do this. And I think that this is definitely one of the most successful of these. And then they close the set out with a bunch of checklists. And the checklists have a really cool pop art effect to them. And in my personal opinion, this really does carry across to be the best of the gold parallel. This is where the gold parallel shines and really shows the full intent. This is the right card for it. And that was the set. The set was pretty basic. So some rookies, subsets, general cards, some stuff at the end, 3 parallels, and only 1 insert set in packs, interestingly. And the insert that they had was their Crash the Game cards. This would become a staple moving down the road for Collector's Choice. And it was a simple contest. If the player is the winner, you send the card in and you get a redemption set in return. So the card set is based on 3 different position groups. They have the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the wide receivers. And they actually have a couple of rookies as well. So Marshall Faulk, for instance, has a card here in this set. The cards themselves, they have a foil Crash the Game logo down at the bottom, and that comes in blue, but it also comes in green. So they released this both in a hobby release and in a retail release. So if you only went to retail stores, you would get 1 color of foil. If you only went to hobby shops, you would get another type of foil. So in order to complete both 30 card sets, to get all 60, you would need to get your cards from both locations. And the prize cards are, if you had a winner, there were 3 tiers of winner. There was first, second, and third. And if you got a third place winner, you sent that in, you got a complete 30 card set with the foil as bronze. If you got a second place winner, then it came with silver cards, and if you got a first place winner, it came with gold. And so that means that every single card has a blue card and a green card and a gold card and a silver card and a bronze card. All 5. So that means there are 5 copies of every card. So there are 150 total cards, total different cards, if you want to collect all of the sets. And then the only other thing that they did for Collector's Choice was they had a redemption card. And the redemption card was for their then and now cards. And it looks at players' legends, and then it also looks at the modern players who are basically taking over that, who are carrying on that tradition. It's an 8-card set. It has a header card with Joe Montana, and then it has 6 cards for the different players, and then the last card is a checklist card that includes just Eric Dickerson. So that was the only other thing that they did for Collector's Choice. Sort of. Now, there had been a long tradition in hockey of making card releases for Canadian audiences, including doing that with the French language on the cards so that you had a whole different language. And in basketball, they had started doing something similar in Europe. But in football, there was no other nation to really cater to. But at the same time, we had a neighbor that we hadn't addressed. Down below our border, Mexico had just not been embraced in card collecting, in part because they hadn't really embraced our sports to the degree that we would necessarily like to. It didn't have a really strong economy, so it's not like they had this burgeoning middle class that was ready to just waste money on nothing. But for the NFL, there was enough of a relationship with our neighbors to the south that Upper Deck decided to make a run of seeing if they could actually open into that market. So they made a 1994 Upper Deck set, and it's referred to as 1994 Upper Deck Spanish. But the cards are actually the Collector's Choice set, as in literally the whole set. Starts off with the rookies, and then it has the subsets, and then it has almost all of the players, and then at the end it looks the same as well. every single one of these cards has both English and Spanish on it. So it is dual language, which is, it's actually a cool opportunity for people who are trying to learn Spanish to kind of play around with this. It's a fun thing. But when I say almost all of the players, it's really strange because the cards start, one is card number 1, card 100, same card in both sets. But then toward the end, they have a whole chunk of cards they just took out. A few cards slid forward, another chunk they took out, and then the last portion slid forward. So the card set is significantly less. The early cards are the same, the very last cards are the same, but in those chunks that they took out, which are really random chunks, there are players like John Elway and Jerry Rice that are missing from this set for reasons I will never understand. But that's the way the set is built. So if you want to look at this card set as another parallel, a fourth card for the Collector's Choice cards, for most of the set, it is actually a direct one-to-one parallel. And the earlier cards actually share the same numbers. But for the 1994 Upper Deck Spanish set, there are no inserts, there's nothing special, nothing at all. And it is a one-off. They didn't make it fly, so they didn't try anymore. But it is one of the few Spanish language card sets that's really ever been made for the 4 important sports. So that is the only other thing they did for Collector's Choice in 1994, but it's a really interesting one, a really fun one. And Collector's Choice would continue for quite a few years, running through the crazy things that the 1990s were doing. And it was a really fun portion of this whole mess. Now 95, things get really carried away, so I'm definitely going to be looking at that as one video. But I mean, I've been talking for long enough with this one anyway, so this will be good. But do look out for the 1995 and then 96 and on. I will be doing those at a later date, or depending on when you see this video, they may already be out. And if you have any questions, definitely pose those questions. And if you haven't subscribed already, do so. And check out my other videos if you haven't had a chance. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.